Hi everybody, Daniel here. This week I'd like to show you the main techniques behind one of my portfolio pieces, this one. We'll try to reproduce something close to this particular band right here. This is what we're gonna do exactly. It's an updated version with more work put into the surface details. The main difficulty of this project is really finding the right blending of the different bands to produce a balanced layout with good contrast and rich details. Let's prepare the graph's outputs. And setting the material definition to tessellation. Tessellation factor of 16, and the scale we need at least 8. We'll start with the main band, this guy here. For this one we'll begin with a moisture noise. Disorder 1 goes to the background of a blend. Multiply. Grab a gradient linear 3, tiling 3, and plug it in the blend's foreground. To isolate only the middle band, take a blend node, copy mode, and play with the cropping area to delete the top and bottom bands. Now with the levels node, we'll clamp the values. Level in low 0.2, high 0.3, mid 0.8. Then we need to bevel it to give it nice borders, but a simple blur will do fine and is way cheaper. Now we have to blend this blur with sharper gradient. Let's use a min darken blend. The blur goes into the background. In the foreground, we'll just transform the previous gradient linear 3. The goal is to expand the central pure white line. For this, a curve node will be perfect. And this is our main band. Let's frame it. It's not impressive, I know, but it's a very important start. Now it's time to build our sculpt base. There's a simple way to do it, with a liquid noise. Let's make the noise frame, then bring a liquid. Alright, the liquid settings that I used are scale 8, disorder 1, warp intensity 0.1. Then to add more contrast, use the levels node. Change the level in high to 0.7 and the level in mid to 0.54. To make it more complex, we'll blend this liquid with itself using a min darken blend. In the background, make use of a safe transform with a minus 30 degrees rotation. In the foreground, I just offset the liquid with a transform 2D. X offset 0.06 and Y offset minus 0.03. Then we can blend this with the main band using a min darken blend. The liquid goes into the foreground. And this is our sculpted band. What I like with this technique is that we have relatively sharp edges. It comes in handy when making rocks. Let's frame the sculpt base, the latest blend included. And now let's build our first sculpt pass. Starting from the sculpt base, let's choose a blend node, set to screen. The sculpt base goes into the background directly. In the foreground, almost the same, but with a transform 2D in between, just to offset it. X minus 0.15, Y minus 0.04. Let's repeat this step, starting from this new blend. Let's add another blend. The difference this time will be in the blending mode, min darken. And the opacity, 0.6. In the foreground, once again, a transform 2D. Divide it by 2, X offset 0.08, Y minus 0.08. And here's our first sculpt. It deserves to be framed too. Well, this could be enough for a simple and quick rock band, maybe a stylized one, but for our purpose, a secondary sculpting pass will be necessary. But before doing it, let's bring some texture grain to our rock. We'll start with a new moisture noise. Pattern size x 0.4, y 2. And pattern angle random 0.1. Now this is going to a normal node, intensity 5. This will be the vector field of a new vector morph node. In the input, well, our first sculpt blend output. The amount, 0.1, will be good. We're not gonna use it like that. I'd like to apply this, slightly blurred, to the sculpt, and then apply it again with more sharpness. Let's do it. In a new blend node set to copy with an opacity of 0.3, we'll plug the first sculpt into the background. In the foreground, the vector morph, with a 0.2 intensity blur and an auto levels. Let's write a comment with this blend, blurry texture. Okay, let's repeat this in a close way, a new blend, copy, opacity 0.3. In the background, plug this blurry texture blend, and in the foreground, the vector morph. Simple, right? The texture shows a bit strongly right now, but it will be toned down in the later stages. This last blend can be commented, sharp texture. And this texture grain sequence can be framed too. Now it's time to really build our rock. With a simple sequence of blends and transforms, we can make something visually interesting. But this is quite tedious to do. The future steps will be more fun and quicker, I promise. As always, we need a blend node. Min darken, the sharp texture blend output into the background. In the foreground, the same, but just with the addition of a transform 2D first. No offset, just a vertical and horizontal mirror. Then an invert, and branch it. A new blend, min darken 0.4. In the foreground, the previous blend sent to a transform 2D. Divide the size by 2 and offset the y-axis minus 0.06. So far, so good. We could stop here and continue with the real texturing part, but I like to make it bigger vertically. Time for a new blend. Add linear dodge this time, 0.5 opacity. In the foreground, we'll try a safe transform this time with the same x and y offset values of 0.05. Now I'd like to start adding a blend. So blend node, max lighten. And in the transform 2D, we won't plug the previous blend, but the one before it. Let's try this as the offset values, x minus 0.057, y 0.165. And let's try the horizontal mirror to bring some variation. Okay, nice. Now let's make the same thing, just to beef up the bottom. So a blend node, max lighten, and the transform is fed by the blend node before the previous one. X 0.27, Y 0.113, and vertical mirror. Okay, it's starting to come together now. That's nice. I like the way the separation line is not just straight, it ripples a little. Let's keep adding details to this. This time we'll need a subtract blend node, opacity 0.7, another transform 2D in the foreground, divide the size by 2, x offset minus 0.0335, and y minus 0.343 and vertical mirror. As you can see, we are carving the rock in a nice way. We are almost there. 2 more blends. Let's push the top up a little. A new blend, max lighten 0.8, and a new transform. This one will take the safe transform of this sequence as an input. X offset 0.042, Y minus 0.25. And let's stretch it vertically, I'd say 80%. We can finish this sequence with another blend and another transform. The blend, max lighten. The transform takes the previous transform as an input. X offset minus 0.248 and Y minus 0.245. And you can try also the vertical mirror. And I think that's it for the second sculpt pass. It's more than enough. Let's frame it and call it second sculpt. with a nice purple color. You know what? Now that we have a strong basis, let's have some fun and apply some details to our rock. First, some holes. We need a cells 4, scale 110, then a blur with an intensity of 2. Now a distance, plug the blur in the mask input. We don't need a source. In the distance node, choose a maximum distance of 16. Then invert it. Connect it to a levels node. Level in low 0.1, level in high 0.32 and level in mid 0.56. Now a slope blur is required, 32, 1 min. At the slope source we can use a clouds 2 without changing anything to it. The density is not high, we can easily double it thanks to a transform node and a blend. Max lighten. Just use the mirror option in the transform node, horizontal and vertical. Now we can blend this with our second sculpt output. The holes go into the foreground. Use the subtract mode 0.6. And don't forget to place the frame for the holes. Now I'd like to make a light accretion detail pass. Very simple. You take the holes, safe transform them, offset and rotation, and connect them to a new blend node. Soft light. It's important to also connect them to the opacity slot. Otherwise you're gonna lose details. You can add a comment or a frame for this accretion pass. Okay, that's nice so far. Let's continue with more details. It's time for a cracks pass. You can't do rocks without cracks. It's not possible. So let's make cracks. Start with a cells 1. Scale 9, disorder 1, and plug it to the mask and source input of a distance node. Maximum distance of 256. Then a edge detect, tolerance 1, edge width 1.5. Then I like to use the multi-directional warp, the one made by Vincent Go. If you want it, you can find it on Substance Share for free. As it requires a color input, just use a gradient map and send your edge detect output to it. In the strength and angle inputs, you can connect a noise. In my case, I choose a purling noise. Scale 32, no disorder. No global angle, and a small strength value of 0.02 in the multi-directional. Then we can send those cracks to a slope blur to create nice detailed borders. Of course, you need a grayscale conversion. In the slope input, I'd use our first moisture noise. The slope blur settings 32.4 min. Okay, just bear with me. We're almost done with those cracks. I know it's a long process, but rocks are tough to make, but they're worth it. So connect your slope blur to a blur node. Intensity 0.15. We'll use the levels node to decrease the strength of the cracks. Level in high 0.53, level in mid 0.3. Okay, let's invert it. And to give you some control over the cracks, you can bring in a safe transform. No tiling, no offset, just a rotation. Minus 130, for example. Now we can blend those cracks with our previous blend, but before doing it, I'd like to build a quick mask. I don't want cracks everywhere, so yeah, it can easily be done with a levels node and safe transform. Plug the first moisture to the levels. Level in low 0.24, level in high 0.75. and level in mid 0.62. In the safe transform, just a Y offset of 0.24. And this is our mask. That goes into the opacity slot. Don't forget the subtract mode and to lower the opacity of the blend node. That's fine because we don't see the cracks too much. They are here, but not in a weird way. Okay, 2 more details to go, and we are done with the height. Now I'd like to make very small holes. I think it's a nice touch to bring to the texture. For the holes, we can start with a clouds 3. Disorder 1. And to scale this for cheap, just use a high-pass grayscale with a 1.6 radius. Then a histogram scan, 0.98 contrast, and position 0.42. And to make them really small, a safe transform is the way to go. We just need a tiling of 4. Now blend them with the previous blend, subtract, and 0.7 opacity. But we wouldn't want those many holes everywhere, so let's use a mask, as we did with the cracks. We just can build it based on the previous blends mask, the safe transform. Invert it and connect it to a levels node. Level in mid 0.7 and the mask is done. Good. Let's build the small holes frame and let's keep pushing. Last detail to make, the stripes. I wanted to feel some layering in the rocks, so we can do them with a directional warp. Intensity 34 and warp angle minus 170 degrees. In the input, plug the previous blend. As the intensity, we can make use of a directional scratches. Scale 2, angle random 0.02, disorder 1, and pattern size x 0.46. Now plug this through a slope blur, both in the grayscale and the slope inputs. Settings 32, 0.05 min. This then goes through a gradient map and the multidirectional warp in the strength and angle the previous blend. Strength value 0.02, global angle 0.3. You send the results to a grayscale conversion and to a safe transform, tile 2. And that's it. Blend the stripes with the height. Subtract 0.08. It's discrete, but we can feel them. A nice addition, I think. Don't forget the stripes frame. Now I'd like to make the opacity map, because I'd like to focus only on the bands of rocks that we made, and nothing else. It's easy to make. Plug the height to our levels. Level in high 0.08 and level in mid 0.6. For a better effect, we can blur it a little. Intensity 8 or 10. Alright, we are getting there. To make the roughness pass, let's start from the normal, which, by the way, currently has an intensity of 20. It's a good level intensity for rocks. In order to gather the most details possible, I will grab a normal to height HQ, relief and height to 1, and quality high. Let's invert it and use the traditional histogram range to gain some control over it. For the range, I choose 0.9 and 0.6 for the position. Okay, great. Our roughness is down. We can see it better with the panorama map. It's a basic roughness, but good enough for our purpose. The last thing to do is the color path. This step will be sped up because it's a long process and I like to take the time to try different options, and it is quite difficult to replicate. Here, just by changing the offset on one of the transform nodes in the second sculpt pass, we get more curvy lines, more curvy separations. And in the sculpt base, just by adding a rotation to the transform node, we get a more complex structure, a more rocky surface. We could always, make things differently, make better cuts into the rocks, better breaks. If you have any suggestions, I'll be glad to read them. That's important that we learn from each other. So tell me what you think in the comments. Some of you asked for a video about glass, making some glass. So next week I'll show you a sand I've been working on with some details on it. There will be glass and other cool things with it too. Thank you for your support. If you have any other requests, please share them in the comments. Have a good week and see you next Monday. Bye bye.